welcome back to Rio City Conversations. We are back in the studio with episode 1500, and it is so great. I'm here with the one and only Patrick, the man Mankin.
That's me.
And our very special guest, Sister Kayla. Kayla Knott.
Kayla, welcome to the #1 rated church podcast in San Antonio. We have over 2 million
That's a lot.
subscribers.
subscribers.
It's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So no pressure. No pressure. Kayla, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your full name? How old are you?
Okay, so I'm Kayla Knott. I'm 19. I go to UTSA, and that's about it, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so great. Kayla Knott, UTSA. What are you studying?
Pizza.
I'm a microbiology pre-med.
Wow.
Fancy.
She's already smarter than us.
When you led off with micro, I thought, yep, she's going to be really, that's going to be something that you're going to make a lot of money with. Mm-hmm. What do you do for work right now?
I'm a pharmacy technician.
Okay.
A drug dealer.
The legal kind, though. The legal one.
I think, though, like baristas are legal drug dealers, too.
It's true.
I go see my drug dealer every morning.
I was there once today, at least.
Oh, yeah.
At least
times.
once today.
At least
I have a drug dealer at Starbucks. Mm-hmm. I have one at Quick Trip. That's when things are rushed. I need to get in and,
I don't need the good stuff.
yeah. I get the
Ooh, Black Rifle coffee for me.
Black Rifle.
That's where I go for
You
my
frequent that?
dealers. Oh my goodness, they're so nice to me.
They are. They're pretty great people there.
They're
Kayla, what
fun.
kind of coffee
They
do
have
you
fanny packs.
That they
Fanny
do.
packs are cool.
It's in right now, right?
Yeah, totally.
For
old people.
What's your coffee of choice?
I like frappuccinos a lot right now and caramel macchiatos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you go?
Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yup.
Do you have the points?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I do.
That's
too.
how you do it. Scan my app, please.
How many points do you have?
I think I'm down to like 25 right now. Kept using them.
Man,
What was your highest?
In the 300s.
Yeah. I'm at 500 points.
there was a while there where I was getting coffee for Natasha and like the rest of like some of her other teachers that she worked with. Mm-hmm. I was in a couple thousand points after going
Oh my gosh.
a couple times a week and like.
And part of
Rack 'em
you thinks like, I'm going to nail something here. Like I'm going to get like a whole bunch of things. And they're like, for 400 points, you can get a free coffee. And I'm like, what?
That's it.
What am I getting all of these points for nothing? It's crazy. Well, we're talking a little bit about God speaking. So Patrick, the man Mankin, had a great sermon on Sunday. So well done.
Were you
Kudos
there?
To you.
I wasn't. I was working.
Did you listen to the podcast already? Did you listen to the sermon already?
Yes, I did.
Tell me now, be honest. Be honest. How much did you cry? Because you were so moved.
A few times, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. So there's that. I know I was crying for sure. But let's talk a little bit about this subject of God speaking. So we've been in this series, Why God? And we're kind of asking the question like, why can't I sometimes feel God speaking? Mm-hmm. So have you guys ever been there in your Christian walk? Have you ever felt like, yeah, I don't really feel like God's really talking a whole lot to me right now?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Where you're just speaking out, crying out to God, and there's a lot of like nothing.
Yeah. What are some ways that you guys have felt like, and I know, Patrick, you hit on this a little bit, so maybe Kayla, you can kind of talk, since you've talked so much this weekend.
Yeah, I'm just here to sit and listen.
What are some ways that you feel like God has like spoken to you, or how has God spoken to you?
I really base a lot of like God talking to me with my gut feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I'll go down one path and then I feel like, no, maybe not. And so I'll sit, think about it, talk to God about it, and go back to like a different path.
That's awesome. Yeah. Did you grow up in church?
I did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did too. And I think for me though, like a lot of times it was very almost over spiritualized a little bit, where it's like, man, if you miss this, if you miss God's voice, you've missed God's will for your life. Mm-hmm. Patrick, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
I definitely came from like a small Pentecostal church once I started going to church. And so there was a lot of just kind of that pressure in there of like between speaking in tongues or hearing God, all, you know what I'm talking about, just kind of all the things. And it's like, it's on you. don't you miss this.
Yeah.
Get on the train, get on board.
Yeah. It's crazy. Did you ever feel like, I guess like for me, I think back to like college years too, where it was almost like a little amplified at times for me, where it's like, God, what am I supposed to do with my life? You know, like which path should I take? Looking like for you, Kayla, like, and Patrick too, and let's just throw it out on the table here. You said like you follow your gut. Have you ever felt like God has used like other things in your life or people in your life to kind of speak to you? Do you have like a certain example of that? This question goes for both of you.
He talked to you first though, so
Okay.
Ladies first.
Yeah, actually, my first semester, so just last semester of college, I was in a youth group at the school, and they were pretty great, but after a while, it kind of felt like it was all just over and over again. It felt more like a chore, and so I think God was really like pulling me that way.
Yeah.
So that way I know what it's like to not be on the right path for me personally. So he brought me back from that, and I ended up finding another group that I joined. I really liked them a lot.
Yeah. That's cool.
nice. And, you know, I would agree too. You made a comment about, you know, back in college or younger years. And I kind of even think too, being a teenager and being in high school and going to youth group. And I feel like everything is amplified for sure. Like there's already like high emotions, high feelings. And then I think there's a bigger passion too, to want to hear God, to want. And, you know, that's all the bigger thing I think when you're younger is like, God, what's your will for my life? Like we're looking for direction. And maybe even at times, like we're just looking for someone to tell us what to do so we don't have to think as much about it. Yeah. Like, God, you already got a plan. Just tell me what it is and I'll go do it. And I think so many times though, we forget that like, or we're out looking for like something that maybe we wouldn't normally want to look at to do, you know, or like a direction we wouldn't normally want to go. Yeah. Because we think like, oh, God's not going to, you know, put me in a place I'm going to love to go to or something like, you know, like, oh, I don't want to work in a pharmacy. I want to work on the construction site or something. So God's going to push me towards the pharmacy. And even though I know I don't want to go there, but it's like, man, if you want to be a microbiologist and count pills, I don't know how that works out, but
it's micro. Think micro.
Then itty bitties.
Yeah. Small pills. Yeah. You know, like God will speak to us, but I think we're always looking for just where this big revelation. And I think sometimes, you know, as a teenager, that's what we're looking for as a young college student, rather than just kind of like something we spoke about on Sunday morning was like that gut feeling, like God's, and you know, sometimes like God's voice can sound a lot like our own voice, meaning like he speaks to our heart, right? He speaks to desires of our heart, and he's already kind of molded us into that, I think. So it's not like this big turnaround, like, oh, I love doing these things, but God's going to send me off to do something else. Well, like you've already been designed and molded, and God's like working that in you already. So you are ready when he does like reveal it, like officially, you know, like, oh, here, do this. This is what I want you to do with your life. Yeah.
Kayla, were you like, for you, like moving into this, microbiology? Did you like, where did that passion come from? Is it a passion now, or is it just kind of like, I don't know, this is like a career choice, I'm just doing this? Like,
no, I think from a young age, I've always wanted to go into the medical field just because that's what I grew up in. My parents are both in it. Yeah. And there was a lot of juggling, choosing my major to go into a pre-med major. So I juggled around through biology, biochem, chemistry, a bunch of different things, and I finally landed on micro. Mainly because it had a lot less chemistry and more bio, so it was a little easier to get through. But also, like actually looking into a microscope all day long fascinates me now. Yeah. Getting to see how these little things work and move around.
Do you ever look at COVID?
No, I haven't yet.
Can you look at COVID?
You can.
Somebody has.
It's a virus.
Well, we have those like pictures of the little green monster thing.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, like what would you maybe even tell someone who's like your age or a little bit younger, maybe graduating high school, where it's like, you know, they love Jesus, they want to honor the Lord like through their life, but they're trying to figure out like what to do. What advice would you give them just in terms of talking to God about that, really feeling like that confidence to step forward and to do whatever it is?
Honestly, just make a list. I made a list and I went to God with my list and I was like, here's what I want to do.
Come on.
Help me figure out where to go with this.
I love that. That is such great advice.
Man, only someone in the medical field would think, let me just make a list. Let me just jot down all my thoughts and here we go. And let's study this now a little bit.
That's so great. I wish I would have had that advice. Because, I mean, truly, like for me, I mean, I'm very happy with where I'm at in my life, but I think I probably would have saved myself a lot of heartache if I would have just, if you bring some theology involved in this, like I mentioned this a little bit on Sunday just within our teams, but just talking about the goodness of God, and that God truly, I think he just, like, he wants to meet the desires of our hearts as long as those desires are honoring to him and they're not like, hey, I desire to go be a bank robber for the rest of my life. Like God can't bless that. But if it's something that's just like, a field or whatever, and you're passionate about that, I think for those, especially who've grown up in church, it can get a little bit like tough for them because it's like, oh man, well, but it has to be like, what is God's will? It's like, what does God want me to do? And sometimes it's just like, man, just jump into something and then you're going to realize what you're passionate about. You know what I mean? Like just try different stuff and don't get so spiritual about it. It's like, it's just work. You know what I mean? Like it's not just work because obviously wherever you work, you can glorify God in whatever you do, whether that's working at a manager at Chick-fil-A or, being a microbiologist or, driving for Uber or whatever the case may be. You can honor God through those things, but it's like take the pressure off a little bit. And oftentimes, like, you might hear God speak a little bit more as opposed to just being so overwhelmed by it. You know what I mean? And I think for college students, this applies, but I think for single moms who are in their 30s, this applies, for whatever case it may be. I think sometimes we can kind of overcomplicate it. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think we definitely have a great ability to like get in our own heads even. And, not the whole time you're talking was like, we totally can over spiritualize things. And we think everything just has to be this great big experience or life-changing event. And, and even I was thinking about this before, like our, even like our moments probably not in places that are not like where we're supposed to end up, if there is a place we're supposed to end up in life, if it's a job, like even in those kind of maybe they're valleys, like you think of just kind of this inside in between the mountains, in between where you really are trying to get to, God moves in us in those moments and God speaks to us. And maybe it's a little bit easier to hear him because you're not like the happiest, you know what I mean? Like at that moment, like we don't usually go to God and ask him for things when we're happy. Right. And we're in a great place in life. Like that's not the time we talk to God the most. Yeah. So even in those places, it's kind of like a great, pivotal moment for us to be able to experience God more, I think, and be able to be in a place where you can hear him even better than you would if you were like at your dream job and you were making, 6 figures a week. You had all the Dogecoin in the world.
The Dogecoin. Well, with that being said, I think there is something to be said about when God does want to speak and he will like move dramatically, to get our attention. Yeah. And I think we need to be aware of that too, where you might feel like you mentioned this on Sunday too, where God will speak through open and closed doors. And it's like, I think God does show himself through closed doors oftentimes. And I think a lot of people will approach closed doors as like, God's not speaking, right? Where it's like, I want to do this, or I feel like you want me to do this, or this, or you want me to marry this person, or you want me to whatever. And it's like, if that thing doesn't happen, what do we often do? We're like, God, where are you? Are you speaking? And it's like, well, yeah, God's speaking. A no is also an answer, right? Like that's been one of the most, probably one of the most comforting things for me. And, I'm 34, almost 35. Patrick's 60, moving on 65. And both of us have lived a little bit of life. Kidding, everybody's. How old are you, Patrick? 39. You're in your 30s still.
I'm in my 30s still.
It's beautiful. But my point is like I've learned to pay attention to no's oftentimes in my life. You guys know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, that's a no, but that's still God's way of saying, hey, I'm leading you and I'm directing you,
Yeah.
Like even golly, this was way back we're kind of have a little bit of a young audience angle this week. But like, I remember in high school, like I felt like when God saved me and called me into ministry, I was 16 years old. And I really felt like the Lord called me into full-time ministry. And I was like, my dad's a pastor. And part of me was just like, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, God, are you sure about this? And so part of me was kind of like, no, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go into business. And, I'm going to get my business degree and start a business one day. And I remember playing football. And at that time, I was a lot smaller and more athletic and could run faster. So I was a decent ball player in high school. And I remember thinking, like, I'm going to try to play in college, and all this stuff. And it was right around that age where it was like I'm making decisions for post-high school. So I was a junior in high school, and I played this football game, and I went in for a tackle, and the guy kind of was like running by me, and my leg planted, and I twisted my knee really bad, and my ACL tore. Ouch. And I was like, oh, that sucks. That hurts. And I never got it fixed. So basically it kind of kicked me out of football. And it kind of is one of those things where I'm like, I don't think God hurt me. You know what I'm saying? But I think he used that to get me kind of in alignment to where I needed to go and what I needed to pursue and do what he ultimately has called me to do. And it was kind of like, that was still an answer, and just God worked along the way and got me to where I am today, like lead pastoring a church. And I love it. Like it's just kind of crazy how God works all that stuff out, or even like when I did go to choose my college, what I was going to do, like after high school, I made a phone call to one place and they never answered. I made a phone call to this other place that was just the same type of school and they picked up the phone right away. And I was like, all right, I think I'm going to go over there. Like literally that was how I decided. I was like, God, that must be you, and I met my wife there, like it's just kind of crazy how God uses all these seemingly insignificant things in our lives to actually speak to us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have you had similar experiences, either of you?
Yeah. For me, that was, I kind of hit on it a little bit on Sunday, but there was, this period God spoke to Natasha, through Natasha to me, through our family about, change was coming. And so immediately we're like, oh man, get ready. Like, let's get our bags packed. Get ready. Yeah. God's going to do something. And I made a little bit of joke about Oklahoma. You're from Oklahoma.
Great joke, by the way.
Natasha is from Tulsa, so it's fine.
That's our people, man.
You lived in Oklahoma for a while.
In Oklahoma.
I've been to Oklahoma many times and been destroyed by the mosquitoes there. But either way.
And the Dust Bowls.
The Dust Bowls. Books are written about them. Okay. So, I mean, like, there was this, it ended up being, at the time we didn't know it was going to be this long, but it was 2 years from the time that God put it in our hearts that something was going to happen before even, we heard about, like, this other church plant that introduced me and Chris together.
Yeah.
That it was, it was 2 years. So there was 2 years that I was looking. I was, like, physically out looking. I drove to Oklahoma many times because I just had like some connections in Oklahoma where I just knew about some positions at churches that were opening up. So I went and interviewed and talking about that. No, I mean, every time it felt good. Like while I was there, I was kind of like anxious and like, oh my goodness, God, are you really going to send us to Oklahoma? But every time I had an interview, and I feel like the interviews actually went pretty well. Like there wasn't like a bad interview. But each time it was definitely like I felt in my heart, it was like, nope, this isn't it. This is gonna, like it was. And then of course they never called me back to hire me. Yeah. So I was like, okay, that was definitely not it.
Yeah.
So it worked out great.
Yeah. It's kind of like what you said, Kayla. It's like almost that kind of gut check, Yeah. Like I think Christians, again, we over spiritualize it, right? Where it's like, well, I can't follow my gut. And it's like, well, but God gave you this, whatever the gut is, whatever that feeling is, like that's oftentimes God speaking, right? Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt this in like other ways, or have you felt like God has spoken to you? Do you have any other, moments that you can think of?
My life has been that long, so.
I know before we started recording, you were born in December of 2001.
Yeah.
For our audience, that
Not
was
that
post
long
9/11.
Post.
Anyways, go ahead. Or like, do you have questions of like, you're trying to figure this whole thing out too?
I am. It's a crazy journey, but like it's fun, It's hard, but it's also very rewarding in the end.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest like time that I felt God really speaking was actually right before COVID when I was choosing colleges. Like how you said, I had giant list of schools and applying for scholarships, golf scholarships, like anything I could think of.
Yeah.
And right before COVID hit, I was planning on leaving. I was ready to go to any school, not where I'm at right now. And COVID hit, everything fell to pieces. And I think that was God really like telling me like, no, you belong here. And like now I see it, like I've met so many great people. I've fallen more into this spiritual life. And so I really think he kept me here for a reason.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. That's really cool. I really feel like I think my biggest encouragement too, and this goes along with what you were talking about on Sunday, Patrick, it's just that God does want to speak to us. It's not like God is distant, he's far off, he's uninterested in our lives. Like he is interested in our lives, and he does want to reveal his will to our lives. But again, it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. It just needs to be focused on like having an ear that's tuned to him. Like one thing that I've always drawn from the scripture that you used on Sunday, which was the Samuel and Eli story, was that when Samuel, when he was closest, or when he began to hear the voice of the Lord, the Bible talks about in 1 Samuel 3 that he literally was laying where the Ark of the Covenant was. So if you know like temple history and how it was structured, it was at the very inside of the temple. So it was like the closest, literally, scholars would have said that he was laying at the curtain. So there was only one curtain between him and the most holy place. And it wasn't even really where like the priests would be sleeping. That's where Eli was. Like Eli was sleeping in the priest quarters. Here you have this little bitty boy, and he's laying as close as he can get to the presence of the Lord. And I've always taken away from that being like, man, how huge is that for us to think like, man, if you really want to hear the voice of the Lord, you got to position yourself,
get in your place.
Get in your place. And oftentimes that's getting God's place, wherever God is. Like the Bible is there for our joy, it's a gift. Prayer is a gift from God. And I think I'm guilty of this all the time, where it's like, God, I just want to hear your voice. And it's like, God's like, okay, well, are you ready? Like come spend time with me. I mean, the importance of taking time to literally insert yourself into the presence of the Lord. And it's like, we're all busy. We've all got reasons and excuses not to do it. But man, if you really want God to lead you and direct you, then you've got to position yourself like Samuel did, get in your place and get into the place of the presence of God, and then God's going to speak. He just will. Like that's that whole thing where he's like, he just wants to communicate to us,
Yeah. And it was even, I kind of pointed that out too. It was like, it was in his rest. He wasn't, he wasn't even doing anything.
Wasn't working.
Right.
Yeah.
Even to this point, he wasn't even asking God.
Yeah.
God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
With my life? Although, I mean, for him, he probably knew he was going to be he's going to be working in the tabernacle all of his life. That was it. But he wasn't looking for anything from God.
Yeah.
The Bible, in that passage, it even says he never heard from God. He really didn't have a relationship with God at that point.
Yeah.
Even growing up, basically like hearing the Torah, hearing about God all of his life, and still, even like his life was literally dedicated to God. And even then, he just wasn't asking for anything.
Yeah.
But it was laying there. It was just being as close as you can get.
Yep.
Sleep.
It's true.
Put your Bible on your nightstand. I don't know.
It's true. And I think the juxtaposition
Oh my goodness. We get into theology
between Eli and Samuel. Here you have Eli, who the Bible says there was no vision, in the land. The reality was there was vision. He just couldn't hear it because, here you have Eli, this older man who knew probably what he should have been doing, but he allowed sin in the camp, so his two sons they're acting a fool in the temple. And you have Eli who's not stepping up and leading as a dad, and just even as a priest for his role should have been one where he's removing sin from his life. And I do think that is a point to be made. And I think it's something that we just don't want to talk about oftentimes, but it is something that I think is important for the life of the believer. Is like, it's not to be perfect, but it is to just be stepping in the direction of the Lord like Samuel was, that God will speak to you when you do that. But here you have Eli, who's not only physically being blinded, but he's spiritually blinded, And I think it's because he's just allowing all this stuff to just get into his life and into his family's life. And I don't know. I think there's a little bit of that to be said for maybe even for the Christian who's like, they're struggling to hear the voice of the Lord. I would also say like, hey, there is this one area where I think it does require us to take inventory and say, am I allowing things into my life? Am I doing things that is preventing me from hearing from the Lord? Peter, he talks about God opposes the proud person, but he gives grace to the humble. And that whole thought is like, Peter's saying when you're proud and you're like, well, I'm just going to do what I want. And that's really essentially what sin is. God opposes that. It's like this, his hand is against you. But if you're humble and you're looking to the Lord, it's like he's gonna give you grace. He's gonna lift you up, and that's huge, especially in a culture that's like not pro God and not pro like, hey, right living. I think it's just something to consider in a big way.
Yeah.
Like, Patrick, what's your secret sins, man, that you need to confess right now?
All right, guys, get your notes out. Here we go.
Josh, what's yours, man? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But it is a point to be made, So.
Yeah. So, Kayla, I'm actually kind of curious. What would you maybe say would be sort of like the biggest hurdle, either in your personal life, you want to speak to that, or just maybe, speaking to two old dudes here, people, youths. Where can I find one?
What is it?
They pop. You pop them in your mouth.
Put them in your mouth. Yeah.
Make your breath fresh.
Sorry.
Tic Tac.
Oh, I told you.
You're so old. You don't even know. But what would you say maybe is kind of like the biggest hurdle for your age demographic, if you will, to hearing maybe God's voice, or do you find friends, like you've talked about this new group of friends that you've come up with now, and you've got to meet more people because you have been trapped in San Antonio by God. No, not trapped. But you know what I mean. So, like, what would you say? Is there a hurdle that people are struggling with to hear God's voice, or is everyone just like hearing it and I don't know?
No, definitely struggling to hear his voice sometimes. I think for my age group specifically, I think it would be like social media and just wanting to live the ways of the world, because we're just so wrapped up right now in like, but what's in, what makes me look cool? Like, are people going to like me for this? Me personally, it's definitely my social media. I want to have like the most likes, the most comments, the most views. But that's not glorifying God. God wants me to use my platforms and everything for him.
Yeah.
I'm glad church isn't like that.
By the way, I got you. I like your stuff on the thing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Man, so social media. So just like being on it, wondering what's the next best TikTok dance I can do.
Yeah. Just TikTok consumes
comparison,
us.
man.
It's
comparison. We're all guilty of it. Old people, we're just as bad. 50 and above,
maybe worse.
Even worse.
We've had a lot of practice.
It's true. It's true. Man, we're all there. Well, this has been good, and I think it is just an encouragement for all of us just to know, like, it's like this. God's voice is like a wellspring of life, and He wants to speak. And there's a dog in the background. I don't know if anybody can hear that.
That's just a sound effect Josh is doing right now.
Josh, is that you barking?
Quit making those dog sound effects. What are you doing?
Well,
on the podcast.
As I make the spiritual point with the dog barking in the background, point is like God's voice is like a wellspring of life, and all we have to do is just tap into it, and God will speak. So get in God's word, like you mentioned, Patrick. It's like get in God's word, listen to trusted people in your life who love Jesus and can speak to you and encourage you.
Join Kayla's life group.
That she's going to start leading very soon. Through her out there on that one. And then
find her on social media at Kayla.
I don't even know what it is.
Where can people find you?
How can people connect with you?
I
think she had a golf ball on her, the front of her.
I used to play golf.
So we know who to take with us to Topgolf.
Yeah.
And we were watching the PGA. Were you watching PGA? I know we got super spiritual and I flipped it. I'm sorry.
Everybody can close this off now, but we'll keep recording. I do want to know, like, do you play golf?
I do play. I played all 4 years of high school. I planned on playing college, but that
We
didn't
made a new friend.
Hey, I know some people. We go golfing.
Really?
Yeah.
I love golfing. I haven't gone in a while, though.
You'll school us. I cannot. I don't know. I literally have to find out like what clubs to use and everything. Josh golfs. I've gone golfing with Josh. I have to use Josh's clubs. Oh shoot!
Yeah.
I act like I'm some sort of pro. I'm like, oh yeah, tell me what's your range?
Do you have clubs of your own?
We have 4 sets at home, I think.
Okay, so we got extra clubs to borrow.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, that's so good. Well, thanks, Kayla, for being on the podcast today.
Yes.
And
Had fun.
yeah, thank you guys. So, quick announcement: we will be at the YMCA talking about the YMCA on June 6th. It's a new location. What was that not good?
Oh, it was perfect.
Yeah, it was a little pitchy. YMCA 151 in Petranco, June 6th. We start weekly gatherings on June 6th,
What time?
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
So new location, new service times, new frequency of meeting. It's just new everything.
Come for
and I can't wait.
Jesus. Stay for the swimming pool or the library. I don't know.
Get
There's
a good workout in
restaurants
afterwards. It's so
nearby.
great.
Yep.
And we will be playing the YMCA when people walk in. Oh.
Everything's going to be there, guys, including God.
Yeah. All right, bye. See you guys.
See ya.